Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you can take your seats, please. I hope you had a good lunch and I hope you had a good morning. The room's laid out for the think tank, so the round tables with think tank topics on them. If you know the think tank that you're going to be in, then by all means join that table now. But otherwise, take a seat, and then after this presentation, we'll take a short pause just to kind of reintroduce the think tanks, and then you can join the session then. You'll see laid out on the tables evaluation forms. So again, anyone who's leaving early, anyone who's crazy enough to leave early, please complete the evaluation forms. They're very important to us, and we take those opinions very seriously. One of the things that we've changed this year is we've introduced a couple of keynote speakers. There were some people and some topics that should be that just needed their own kind of special focus. And one of the reasons for introducing the keynote presentations was very much for this particular keynote and this particular person, really. We're all huge fans of automotive logistics industry. We know how important it is. But I'm not sure if it's recognized in its importance, and the executives are recognized for the hard work that they do. I remember quite a few years ago, I tried to get as a speaker for the conference, Lee Scott, I think his name was, who was then the president of Walmart. And the reason I wanted him as a speaker, apart from I wanted some kind of discount card from Walmart, was because he used to be the head of logistics. That was pretty well his previous job. And then he became the president of Walmart. And wouldn't it be good if the next president of Ford or General Motors or any of the car makers globally was someone who's the current head of logistics? Although I look around me and I think maybe it wouldn't be such a good idea. But the basic idea is there that logistics and supply chain is so important for a company that if you can handle logistics, if you understand the complexity of logistics and supply chain, if you can master the communication in this area as we discussed this morning, if you can be in a part of the organization like logistics and supply chain that touches all areas, then surely that's the sort of person who should be the next president of a major corporation. And wouldn't it be good if there was a chief supply chain officer or a logistics officer who reported directly to the president at the very least? So these are things that we aspire to. And I had this conversation with the gentleman, Joe Himricks, who I first met about 10, 12 years ago. The reason I could meet someone as important as him was he was the head of MPNL, global MPNL, materials planning and logistics for Ford. And now he's the president of Americas for Ford, one of the most important people in the global Ford Motor Company. And I said to him, do you think, in fact, I'll even go a step back a little bit further. When I met when I met Joe Himricks in the first week of his job, I said to him, what are your plans? And one of the things he said was, I want to get out of logistics because quite often logistics goes people in logistics tend to go sideways as opposed to up. Well, he's obviously done very well for himself in his position. But a few years later, when I caught up with Joe again, I said, I'm still not convinced that logisticians are reaching the high levels that they should be reaching within car makers. And he said, well, I've got one other example for you, Frederiek Toney. Frederiek Toney, I've known for a few years, despite both of us looking so young and going to the same barber. We've known each other for quite a few years. I think I first met him when he was in service parts, progressed through the service parts organization, moved over to MPNL for a while to see where there were synergies, back into the service parts world, and he's now the president of Global Ford Customer Service Division for Ford Motor Company. Surely one of the most important positions at any car maker, customer service, global customer service. The buying the car is an experience that you can't, happens at the beginning. And if it goes wrong, if it's a pain, you forget about it quite quickly. But if the experience of owning the car goes wrong, then it's not such a, that's when you remember the car. So if you want customer retention, it's very much about the service side. Profitability, very much about the service side. So one of the most important positions in a car maker. So I'm honored and delighted that we've got as a keynote speaker, Automotive Logistics Global 2016, a great friend of ours for many years, in a recent front cover of the magazine. And I'd like to, hopefully consider a personal friend of mine, Frederiek Toney, the president of Global Ford Customer Service Division. Thank you, Frederiek.
Thank you. Thanks, Louis. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm wondering why he didn't invite me to the think tank thing. I guess, is that where you have your brilliant people participate? But it's really a pleasure for me to have an opportunity to come and talk with you. And I have to say, I came to perhaps my first conference that Louis put on back in maybe 2002 or so. And I don't know whether I was running Parts Supply and Logistics or MP&L, probably Parts Supply and Logistics back in those days. But I remember thinking about how cool this is for us in the industry. And that this is going to help improve the profile, the image of everyone who works in and around logistics. Because I know this surprises you, we're not always appreciated. And so I thought that the work that Louis was doing would help people come to appreciate what we all do. And so, I want you all to know that I think that we owe Louis a round of appreciation because of just this sort of thing. And he does it all over the world, and he's raised the profile of people like us everywhere. So let's give Louis and his team a big hand. Thank you, Louis. So you guys see that all you have to do to get on the cover is just praise Louis in front of everybody. I'll go to the first slide, and I switched the slide around right before I came up. I had the company, then I had you, and then I had me. And I wanted to tell you guys that Louis asked me to speak at this conference several times over the years, and I always declined. I was like, Louis, I can't tell them anything they don't know. I don't want to go speak to all those professionals. There's so much I don't know about logistics. Who am I to get up in front of those guys and start talking to them about the thing for which they have the greatest knowledge? And then he said, well, look, maybe do it a little differently. So I agreed to do that, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But you guys have the demonstrated knowledge. You have the passion for what you do, and far be it for me to come in and try to tell you about logistics. But what I can and what I am going to share with you today a little bit is about, a little bit about my background and some of the things I've learned from logistics. But, I am the greatest advocate for people who work in our space. And, before I got the job that I have, and we'd sit around in those rooms and we talk about all of the people on the same grades from different departments inside of Ford. And rarely would the people who work in logistics get their true appreciation that be shown to them. And I have to tell you that every year that I've been in the job, at least one of the people on my team has gotten what we call top achiever. Now, top achiever is when you're the best among the best. And so I've been the greatest advocate for our folks. And recently we've had a number of our logisticians and people who work in our space get promoted outside of our space. Because the business acumen that you acquire, as Louis mentioned, is critical, and it's something that you can acquire if you actually apply yourself in logistics, supply chain, value chain, whatever you want to call it. It's really a great place to learn if you really apply yourself. And I happen to be one, like many of you, I'm sure, who has just an incredible passion for this space. And the thing that separated me from my peers, you can look around. If you're honest with yourself, you know which of your peers kind of loves what they do. And you can tell the ones that, oh my goodness, this person is someone I can learn from. And this person is someone I'm sure is going to move along because just the way they apply what they know and how they apply themselves in that particular function. And so I always looked around, and I found myself over the years sort of caring more than my peers about the little things. You know, when someone asked me to do something, I try my best to make sure I gave them the full benefit of everything I knew. And one time, one of my early bosses said to me, he goes, you know, Frederiek, that's why I like you, because when I ask you a question, you don't just give me the answer to my questions, you give me the answer to my question plus. And it always helps me understand even better the question that I raised. And I always thought that that's really important, particularly in the area of logistics, where everybody thinks they know, but you all know they don't really know. They think because they think it's about shipping something and anybody can put a stamp on something or put a label on it and ship it, they think they understand. But you know they don't. They understand the general picture, but what it really takes to make it successful, they just don't know. And so it's up to you to sort of educate and teach along the way. So, you know, I want to tell you a little bit about Ford. All of you know Ford Motor Company. We're a big company. Recently, we decided we wanted to be more than just a transportation company. We wanted to be a mobility company, too. And that's because, you know, for a long time, we've been producing great cars, and we've been taking care of our customers and those cars. But a lot of other people on the periphery like to come in and what I call cherry pick, take the cream off the top, low investment, you know, high yield type stuff. Well, more importantly, the future says that we need to be able to assist customers to enjoy our products, and we need to help them not only just travel, but also other elements connected with the whole experience of traveling, transportation. So that's what we're about now. And I'm happy to say we support that. We have over 200,000 employees, as you can see here, and there's over 67 manufacturing plants. We have 66, Helmut may have told you that, some of you were in this session, that we have a lot of parts depots across the world. And of course, we have the Lincoln Motor Company, and Ford Motor Credit is a key part of what we do. And so that's a little bit about Ford. Now, my space in there is around parts and customer service. So all over the world, I'm responsible for parts sales. And also all over the world, I'm responsible for the experiences that customers have with our products. And so it's a daunting task. You know, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Dubai. Next week, I'm going to be in India. And so I get to travel all over the world. And I'm enjoying it tremendously. It's quite a challenge. But one of the things that we try to do is bring everyone together around certain principles and certain processes. And I never make a trip if I don't think I can generate about $4 to $5 million of improvement to the bottom line. And what that says is there's a lot of opportunity out there. You go to a place like China. How many of you have entities that you work with in China? A bunch of you, right? Well, then you know what I'm talking about. You know, in China, the dealers who sell our product, they are so used to the revenue that comes from the glamorous side of the business that they simply don't appreciate fixed operation side. Any of you else, any the rest of you have that experience? You can just shake your head like this. And so one of the things that we realize we have to do is we have to go in and teach them the value of fixed ops. Now, Louis talked about the importance of what we do, particularly in service side. You know, recently in terms of case for change, some of the research we did is, you know, the average person spends about 4 hours buying a car, not the time researching what they want to buy, but 4 hours actually in the buying experience, and in which they might be inside of the dealership. And then they spend 900 hours in the car. And most of the time when they come back and touch the company, either touch it through the credit company or through the service side of the business, fixed op side. And yet, about 80 to 90% of the monies we spend advertising, promoting is for that 4 hour window. Think about it. And we're consistent with everybody in the industry. And so one of the things we're trying to do now is shift the attention to consumer experience and what it takes to really stand behind our product better, make sure customers have great experiences, because as Louis mentioned, it's the key for people coming back to us and retaining them as customers. And I don't think that's unique to logistics. It's not unique to Ford. It's to what any of us might be doing, is how we take care of our customers. And so a little bit about me. Louis talked about the time that he met me and I was working in MP&L. But before that, I worked at Caterpillar, where I worked for, I worked 16 hours actually, but I was on their book sort of for 18 because I was laid off for 2 of those years. In 2 of those years, I went to work for Honda, came back to Caterpillar, worked for 8 years. By the time I left Caterpillar altogether, I had 18 years of service time, 16 years of actual service, 2 years at Honda, and then I went back to Honda. And I worked at Honda for another 5 years, and so that's when I really, really sunk my teeth into the automotive side of logistics. And I worked there, and I made it up to assistant vice president of the parts division. And from there, I came to work for Ford. I came in and I took on a project of revamping the North American parts depot system. And that was a great project. And I'll tell you this, it was appreciated as perhaps the best project that we'd ever done in Ford Customer Service Division, and one of the best inside of the company. And the reason that was the case is because the team that worked on the project, we got together and I said to them, listen, if anybody asks you how the project is going, you tell them it's going great. I said, because they don't really understand what we're doing anyway. And the impression that they'll have is whatever you tell them. You tell them it's going great, by golly, they'll start telling people it's going great. The minute you kind of whine and moan about whatever problem you know inevitably we're going to have, that's going to be their impression of our project. And so we kind of came together, and I said, the only time that you need to be transparent about what's really going on is when we can't contain it and it touches the customer. Then we need to immediately spring forward, minimize the damage, and make sure that people are aware of what's really going on. And consequently, I don't know whether it's the best project ever, but that's what everybody says. And I'm okay with that. And so, a little bit about what's on this screen is that I am curious, I am engaged, and I always believe that tomorrow is going to be better. I always believe that. And I also think that today is always better than yesterday. So what can I share with you? And as I said earlier, just think about my talk with you today as life lessons in logistics. So, I started out in parts supply and logistics. I moved to material planning and logistics at Ford. And now I am in charge of Ford Customer Service, which includes all the parts business. So I'm in charge of profit and loss business. And as Louis mentioned, I'm the first person at Ford that's ever been able to get to this position with an operations background. And what's interesting is, I'll tell you all something. Every year that I've been in the position, we've set record profits. Every single year. We've had 18 consecutive quarters of record over record of performance in North America. And so the CFO, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, he says to me, Frederiek, I appreciate everything you're doing, but the thing I appreciate most is that you help us realize the potential of customer service. Because for a long time, we would go in and we'd say the number of units on the road would dictate the amount of sales that we'll achieve. And what I tried to do was change the narrative to say, look, we only get X percentage of the Ford vehicle business on the road. Our focus should be on growing and focusing on how we gain more share, not on whining about the number of units on the road. It's such that when I took the job, I asked everyone, don't talk to me about units on the road. Do not speak about units on the road in one of our meetings where we're trying to motivate people to get to the next level. Just talk to me about our share. Talk to me why our share is where it is and what are we going to do to grow our share. So we changed the narrative, we changed the dynamics, and suddenly we started to gain share. Imagine that. Answer that if that's about my speech. Okay? But it was really important that we changed the narrative. And that's one of the things that I think that I'm most proud of. And it's one of the things that has allowed our people to get the credit that they're due. Because they are part of a growing engine inside of the company. And so this next slide is about things that I want you to major on. Things that I want you to recognize as maybe principles that you can apply to what you do. Things that I've learned over the years. One of the things I try to do, I want to lead with humility and grace. I think I know what grace means. I think it's when you're generous, you do your best to help somebody. The humility part is, though, that's when you don't get full of yourself. You don't start reading the press clippings, so to speak, and believing them. You know, it's when you make sure that you champion the underdog and that, you know, you make sure that, particularly as an advocate for customers, you remember that really and truly customers are always right. Boy, and we've had some tough customers, and I just wanted to say, go buy a GM product. Seriously. But that's never the right attitude. So if you can win them over, then you know you've got the right system in place. And you guys know what I'm talking about. But the customer is always right. So one of my personal things is when things go well, it's because of the people. When things go poorly, it's because of the process. And that way you never end up jumping on people, and you always give them credit. And the more credit you give to someone else, the more that will come to you. Just try that sometimes. But I believe it, I live it, I see it, and I benefited from it. And then let me go to the bottom one. Be diplomatic while being direct. Some of you take such great pride in just sort of telling it like it is, right? Oh boy, I got a chance to tell her or him off. Or I made my point, because that's important to me. But you know, it's just as important to tell them in a diplomatic way, because that's what's important for you to be a great team player. And if you find yourself over-indexing on one or the other, you're probably not in the right place. And if you find yourself not consciously trying to balance that, you're probably not doing as well as you could, because it's a constant battle. You know, when to bite your tongue, when to go ahead and speak. And it's a tough balancing act. So if you're not constantly fighting that battle, you're probably over-indexing one way or another. I mean, I'm around people who are incredibly talented, very, very smart, but they might not have that edge that allows them to sort of tell it like it is when they need to. And they might over-index on seeking consensus when they need to be trying to do what's in the best interest of something, whether it's the customer or the company. And as a leader, you can't always please everybody. And I know when I get a task from the top of the company or from my boss, they rarely ask me, Frederiek, what do you think about that? Usually they say, this is what we want you to do. And so I have enough sense to know. I was going to tell you this later in the slide, in the presentation, but I'll tell you now. One of the things that I know is that if my bosses, if they don't let me off the hook on something, I can't afford to let the people who work with me off the hook. And a few times early in my career, I'd go in and whine and moan about the assignment. And I'd say, oh my goodness, do they know what they're asking us to do? Don't they know what we're already doing? And you know what? I might say that in front of the group. Then I might have more conversation with my boss, and he kind of insisted I go ahead and do it. Then I still got to go back to that team and say, guess what, guys? We got to do this. And all I've done is make my own job harder. And so I learned a long time ago, I don't whine and moan. I try to process what it is we're trying to do and not let my team off the hook, because they still got to deliver. Plus, they think you're a little hypocritical when you come back. And this other one here, care about how you make people feel. I'll talk to you about that as we go through in a few minutes, but that's really important. No secrets. That's about being transparent. So, you know, set your sights beyond your base responsibilities. And I put this slide together. I can't remember what I was thinking at the time. So I'll just share with you what I'm thinking now. How about that? First of all, you want to be transparent, and there's no such thing. I remember thinking that when I came to this group, you know, we spent a lot of time, wanting to guard our confidential information or things that are proprietary information, et cetera. And in the long hours in logistics, the more I realized that I didn't have many new ideas. I had ideas about how to implement ideas. And it was about how we executed as a team that set us apart, whether we were able to succeed or not. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and share company secrets. I'm just saying that when you get all hung up about your own thought process and you start to isolate yourself or your company, it's not the best. And this thing about secrets in the other fashion is, you know, when Alan Mulally was at Ford, he popularized something that you can't manage a secret. And all he meant was, if you put your head in the sand and not acknowledge the problem, then how in the world are you ever going to fix it? And so we believe in putting the moose head on the table, having transparent discussions, and I don't really care what it is. And every time we put the moose head on the table, we emerge with a better solution, with a team that's able to rally around the cause and a team that comes together. I think that's what I meant when I put that slide together. Okay, so no excuses mindset. And it took me several months to put together the things I wanted to say to you guys. And I was sitting in church one day and I wrote this down. It says, going from being responsible to being accountable. And when I looked it up in the dictionary, I found that, the definition isn't that different. So like, how am I going to explain this? So what I mean by this is, you know how you feel like you have a responsibility to deliver something, but many times the things around you affect the results. And so when I say going from being responsible to being accountable, it kind of means like no excuses. Own whatever you have to do. Own it. Don't make excuses on why you don't achieve it. Overcome those things. That's the only way you can be really, really, truly successful. So when I changed my mindset on that, we began to get more done. We set our goals a little higher. We got things done a little bit quicker. And we were better as a team. So I'm just suggesting to you, I think you understand what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say own it. And any of you, most of you are leaders in this room. I bet you had people come to work for you in, let's say, upper middle management or right below you in the organization. And maybe they have to come in and embrace the targets that the team has set. It's a challenge when you have high targets and someone joins your team. It's like jumping on a train that's already moving. They go, holy, you know what? This train is moving pretty fast. I'm not sure I want to sign up for this. Now, depending on how high they are in your organization, it can be extremely disruptive because you have a team that set those targets. They're engaged. They feel like they can do it. You have someone come in and go, man, I'm not sure this is realistic. I'm not sure if this is something we can do. It undermines the team. And they can tell you all the reasons why this is hard. I actually had someone do that and over the years, and this one guy, actually was a guy, we went in this meeting, and Mark Fields, who at the time was running North America in the position that Joe Henry's has, so we introduced some changes to the dealer environment, terms and conditions. And I know this might shock you guys, but sometimes the dealers don't want you to change. They don't like it when you change the terms and conditions. I know that's a surprise to you. Okay, we did that, and we labored for like a year and a half to get everybody we could on board, and then we just had to go. And it had to do is in the logistics area where we have policy RIM, a policy retail inventory management. This is where we recommend to dealers what they stock on their shelves. And we say to them, listen, if you achieve a certain off-the-shelf fill rate to take care of your customers, then you can earn a higher discount. And we changed it from just having a standard discount based on what you buy with no stipulation around requirements on what's on the shelf. And the terms and conditions have been in place for like 15 years. Now, how many of you know that something you haven't looked at in 10 or 15 years offers a lot of opportunity for improvement? So we introduced those changes, and so the boss, as the person who worked for me, been there for like 3 or 4 months, and had the responsibility to implement that change. How's it going? I'm sitting here, the boss is sitting here, and he's sitting here. And he goes, we're struggling. He says, we're struggling. The dealers don't like it. Oh, I jumped in and I said, well, we knew the dealers wouldn't like it, but it's actually coming along pretty well. Thank you very much. And then after the meeting, we had time to talk later. And in a loving, working together kind of way, I talked to him about the importance of not undermining the team that was bought into that. Am I making sense, guys? And so one of the things you have to guard when you have people come onto the team and they embrace the targets you have, they got to embrace them. They got to own it. And this is near and dear because that was a big pivotal point for us. And guess what the dealers do today? They earn more credit. We sell more stuff, and they're happy with the program. So that was about 3 years ago. And fast forward today, it's a program that the dealers like. And so sometimes you just got to forge ahead. And importantly, the people that work with you, they got to own the targets. And so let's move on. So also, we need to seek to have great execution, be transformational in what we're trying to do. This is what we call create value. And all my life, I've had one simple approach. I ask myself, how good am I, or how good are we, how good is the company, how good is our function compared to whoever else is doing it? And then try to find through benchmarking who the best in class is. And merely observe where you are versus best in class, and then just set out on a journey to try to close that gap. And you know that target is always moving. And so you know you got to have a goal that goes beyond where best in class if you ever want to get there. But I followed that approach to everything I've ever done. As a young man who works for our company in China, and he was about to be assigned to lead an effort to have cost reduction all across the China business. So he said to me, he says, Frederiek, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. He says, so much going on in our company that I don't know. And for them to ask me, I don't know where to begin. And this is the advice I gave him. I said, yes, you do. I said, just go find whatever function you want, find out where they are versus best in class, and then you tell whoever's in charge to give you a plan to close that gap. That's all you have to, you don't have to know everything. They do. They have the ability, and that's how you close that gap. And so that's been a formula for success that I personally experienced. And that leads to operational excellence. And so, getting back to you, remember I talked to you earlier about be sensitive to how you make people feel? I want to relate a little short story to you. I only have a couple more slides. Then maybe we can take some questions if you have some. But in building relationships, one of the things that's really important is you have to care about how you make people feel. And two quick stories. One, we actually had Jim Padilla, who was the president of the company, come to visit us when I was running parts supply and logistics. We had an all-hands meeting. And Jim came in, and we had to walk down some hallways to get to our cafeteria where we were hosting the meeting. And this lady was coming toward us, and I stopped and I said to her, I said, hello, how are you doing today? Her name was Warner. And I didn't think anything of it. But Warner sent me a note that day saying, Frederiek, I can't believe that you're with someone so important and you took time to acknowledge me. It was a simple thing. And what that taught me was it's important to acknowledge people. And even when it's not so important to you, it's amazing how you made people feel. She knew that I valued her as a person. And guess what? You know she was very loyal to me and what we were trying to do after that forever. Just because, we treated her like a real person. And another story I want to relate to you, this is about a team situation, and be careful how you make people feel. Probably the biggest problem I've ever created for myself, the worst situation I've ever been in my career, was a time when we had great performance. We were trying to hit a target of 98% parts availability. And we were like 97.5, 97.6, but by golly, we just couldn't get to 98%. So I hit on this notion. I said, why don't we dial up the fill rate to 99 point whatever we need for the fast moving stuff? Because there's no risk to that. It'll burn itself off, or you can slow it down if it's not moving. It's no risk. It's fast moving stuff. Well, we ended up maybe putting that on more parts than we needed. We did. The team went a little farther than I really wanted them to. But at the end of the day, we owned it together, and we ended up spreading that over a wider breadth of parts, such that we ended up with like 1,000 trailer loads outside of our packagers. You guys are in logistics, aren't you? You can relate to that, can't you? So anyway, it was so bad that we had to place emergency orders around our own system. We had to order stuff to get it because we had parts, but we didn't know where they were. They were so backed up in the 1,000 trailers, it was like a nightmare. So here's the story. I went to see my boss, and I told him, I said, listen, we got a problem. It's going to take us like 4 months to get out of the soup, I call it. 4 months to correct this problem. And this is the point. Let me tell you what he said to me. He says to me, he says, well, Frederiek, just tell me, what can I do to help? Now, he could have filleted me. He could have cursed me out. He could have done any of that stuff, right? He could have told me off. He could have read me the riot act, whatever you want to say. That's not what he said. He said, what can I do to help? So I went in to see him feeling like this tall, and I left feeling like this tall, because when I asked him later on why he handled it that way, he said, because you never came to me with a major problem before. He said, so, and be honest with you, I'm not sure if I knew how to help you anyway. But for sure, I know that you're beating yourself up more than I would. So I tell people now, most of the time they come to see me, and I know that they may have had an issue, and I know they're feeling bad about it. I know that they understand what it takes to fix it. You know what I say to them? What can I do to help? And that's all about being sensitive to how you make people feel. So I left that office. I went back and I corralled all the people who were working in that department, because they've been walking around with their head down for a while with their self-esteem not where it needed to be. And I told them, guys, we're in this together. And guess what? The same people who got us in the soup got to get us out of the soup. And if I don't share anything else with you today that you remember, you just remember a story about the same people who got you in the soup has got to get you out of the soup. And going in, chewing them out, making them feel bad, all that does is delay getting out of the soup. That's one of those things that I'll always remember, the way my boss made me feel. So, all those things will help you complete the journey. And, the last thing I'll say is that you always want to be good enough that people want you on the team. And if you treat people well, treat them with respect, you're able to achieve your goals and the company's goals. And you do it in a positive way while working with others. And some of these things I share with you, people will invite you to be on the team. If you were in a draft, someone would draft you, because you're the type of person that they want. That's what I tell many of the young people about being a good team member. I'm going to close off now because I want to take questions from you. And if you do all that stuff, it'll help you be more competitive, help you take better care of customers, and grow your business. And finally, one final thought. It says, be emotionally committed and passionate. Be self-aware of your impact on others. Be empowered to succeed. Leaders help people feel like they're part of the experience at the end of the day. And all of you are leaders, and I encourage you to do the same. And with that, I'll stop talking and take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frederiek. Well, you heard there why I wanted Frederiek to be the keynote speaker. Frederiek's one of those guys that when I go to meet him, and I'm fortunate to be able to go and meet Frederiek quite often when I'm over, I don't think we ever really talk about how many trucks or warehouses or anything like that. It's always this kind of conversation, and always come out inspired. I mean, I'm sitting here with my note cards there on the table, and there's supposed to be questions I'm going to ask Frederiek, but most of them have got a letter L next to them. The L being, these are actually messages for me of what I've learned from your presentation, as opposed to questions to ask you. There are a lot of things that I've personally learned from this presentation, so thank you very much, Frederiek. But I want to give you guys a chance, if you've got any questions or comments that you want to make. The usual sort of rules apply. We've got microphones in the room. Wait for the microphone, say your name, your company name, and then ask the question. That way you can make sure that we can hear you. But, there's a couple of questions that I want to ask Frederiek. Firstly, a sort of relatively simplistic one, but one that drives me crazy, is why isn't logistics appreciated?
I think one of the reasons it's not appreciated is because people oversimplify it, and they think it's something that they readily understand. As we brought new people into our function that maybe have grown up in marketing and sales, for example, they walk away telling me, oh my God, I never realized how complex this business is. And so I think part of the problem is people think it's not as sophisticated or as technical as it is. And it's also one of those things, I don't know that I'd say it's glamorous. Maybe you guys think it's glamorous. But I think people don't think it's glamorous. And so until we can have people truly appreciate the impact that we have on the business, and that we're facilitators of customer retention, great experiences, and truly the biggest reason why people come back to buy our product, at least in our space, we need to spend more time collectively as a community of logisticians educating people about what we do and being advocates for folks. And I'm amazed. We had this one young lady who was a standout, and we wanted to get her, exposed to some more experience. And they came to me and they wanted her to go be like a staff administrator for someone. I go, but what she's contributing in our space is so valuable. But her boss kind of insisted that I send her, and I did. And then she went. She was just like a superstar. They wanted to keep her, And, I wanted to say, no shit. Seriously. She's a tremendous contributor to the company, and she's got to go carry your water pail for you to appreciate her. That's how I felt. And I didn't handle it quite that way, okay? But that's the way I felt. So it's a long answer to your question, but I think that all of us, particularly as we are able to move through the ranks, we need to make sure that people appreciate what the people around us do. And also what we all contribute to the bottom line and what we contribute to a great experience with our products. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Good answer. And just something I did last week with my staff, or with my colleagues and people I work with, I sent out a very small questionnaire, bearing in mind that they knew who it was coming from, they knew I was going to read the answers. But one of the questions, an important question for me was, what do you think I do? And I wonder if we sent that question to our bosses. If you sent that, as logistics guys, sent that question to your bosses or other parts of the organization and asked them, what do you think I do? I don't know how surprised, disappointed we'd be. Not because they don't appreciate it, but they probably don't even know what logistics people do, how complex it is. So I think that's something we should consider. Before I open it up, just another thing that I know that you're very passionate. You're passionate about automotive and Ford and inspiring, but you're also passionate on sport. So sport and logistics. Where's the the inspiration is one thing, but can you kind of compare where could a sports coach be a great logistician, or could a logistician, because of what you kind of do, become a great sports coach?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I think that great coaches could come from logisticians, and great coaches could be logisticians. One of the things that I'm an advocate for, and I tell everybody, that to really, really be good at what we do, and you all know this to be true, there are literally thousands upon thousands of data points, thousands upon thousands of metrics that we all have to monitor and watch. But it's the vital few that the true experts get to know. So when you can whittle all that stuff down to like 9 or 10, and knowing that all these other what I call feeder metrics, that's when you're on top of your game. Because at a moment's glance, you can say, I'm having a problem here. That's when go to dig a little bit deeper. But if you are still involved with looking at thousands of data points, you might be in trouble with your career. That's all I'm saying. And so, as a coach, one of the things that a coach appreciates, every member of the team. And when you're in charge of supply chain, you know that every element in the supply chain is just as important as the other. And if you ever see people wanting to elevate one over the other, you're probably dealing with a dysfunctional supply chain. And when you can get people to work together and appreciate how they all fit together well and not try to elevate one over the other, that's when you can have a great performing team. So that's what a coach does. Same thing we do in logistics.
How the heck did you turn a dumb question like that into such a great answer?
Oh, thank you, Louis.
Question at the front, please.
Thanks, Frederiek. I think it's such a relief after lunch on the second day of a long conference to have a presentation like that, actually. Quite motivating. Ford has been really putting themselves forward as a company trying to turn itself into a mobility, right, from a transportation to mobility firm. And obviously there's been the Ford Pass, and there's been investments in startups in Silicon Valley, and now there's the talk of the autonomous car that will serve fleets like that. I wondered, how are you in the customer service side thinking about this transition? What will it mean? What are some things it will mean for part service and perhaps even logistics to that end?
Thank you, Chris, for that question. As you can imagine, the first thing we try to do is try to anticipate the acceleration of change, because we need to understand what that change will bring in terms of what the requirements are in terms of service. And so with that said, one of the things we realized that for the next 20 years or so, the cars that are being built today will still be the dominant cars on the road. So everybody gets all excited about the latest technology, and that's important. But you have to remember, you still have your core business you have to maintain and successfully manage the transformation or the migration to servicing a broader, more diverse sort of a group of customers and vehicles on the road. And with that said, we think that we have to be able to do it all. Whether you're driving an autonomous vehicle or you're driving one of more traditional vehicles, the elements are the same. We don't know the shape of the distribution channel over time. We expect it to remain much like it is today, but we know that consumers, many times, they're going to move more and more in the vein of placing an order, picking it up kind of deal. And then we think for services, we're going to have to migrate with them to just make it more and more convenient. In our luxury Lincoln Motor Company, we're already doing pickup and delivery for our services. And so my point is that these are the attributes that will always be necessary. And whether you're dealing with a vehicle that might have fewer moving pieces or not, you still need to have a physical place to perform service. We're seeing do-it-yourself business actually declining or leveling off right now because the vehicle is becoming more technical, and do-it-for-me is starting to creep up a bit. And so over time, what we'll see is that service is going to become even more critical to the ownership experience, retaining those customers, and the why buy is going to be based on how good we can actually gin up to provide those services. Thanks, Chris.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay, probably a final question for me, because we're kind of running out of time as well. We had a session this morning about communication. Supply chain is all about communication. In your job now, maybe for all leaders or leadership, is the most important aspect of your job communication?
I think in the end, it really is. I mean, no matter how good your idea is, or no matter how important it is what you want to convey, I think you got to bring people along with you, and you have to be sensitive to socializing things at the right pace, right time, making everyone feel included. So I would say it's pretty important. If it's not the most important thing, it would be among the very top. That would be my own 2 cents. So Louis, am I free to go now?
Absolutely.
Well, then I have one more comment, right?
No.
I just want to thank everybody for listening to me, okay? You didn't throw any tomatoes at me. And I want to tell you, when I started the speech, I felt really great because, I woke up last night in cold sweat. I was standing and speaking to a room and no one was in there, okay? So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Frederiek. That was great. And I'll tell Wendy she can relax. She can keep all the meetings for this afternoon.
Thank you, Louis.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I asked Frederiek to be the keynote speaker. The timing, what might have seemed a bad timing for a speaker, but as Chris said, this is the perfect time for someone like Frederiek and for that kind of subject. So thank you very much, Frederiek. We're now going to be going straight on to the think tanks now. So the think tanks, as you all know, the round tables. The strength of the think tanks is their simplicity. So you see the round table labels around you. The topics are identifying and capturing cost savings in domestic and international supply chains, aftermarket, the evolution of logistics, but the EV in capital. So it's about electric vehicles and how they're going to impact logistics. How the entry of autonomous vehicles into the market change supply chain for OEM suppliers and 3PLs. Highway to intermodal conversion in the inbound supply chain, and route designs with the new DOT rules. And on the packaging side, we've got a special think tank on overcoming the fear factor for changing packaging strategies, something we discussed in an earlier session as well. So please have a look around, choose the think tank, the subject of your choice, and otherwise use the tables as well. If you just want to do your own networking, have your own meetings, talk with each other, by all means do that. But for the next 45 minutes, they're dedicated to the think tanks, and I'll be back joining you to get a summary of the think tanks from the leaders. So enjoy the next 45 minutes to an hour. They're very valuable time. So, but otherwise, once again, thank you very much, Frederiek.